Casperson? Over 70% of those incarcerated in Michigan are parents. 50% of males who have parents that have been incarcerated will also be incarcerated. As a community and state, what do you believe we can do to reduce those percentages?
I visited quite a few correctional facilities. One particular visit, there was a meeting we had in Newberry, actually, and they have an educational component to the Newberry facility. And one of the inmates asked us if we would go out and tell the public the importance of a dad. And he said, the reason I say that is because I'm here and my children don't have their dad. And he said, I grew up without a dad. And it kind of struck me with the way he did it and the way he said it. I felt he was extremely sincere. He had no reason to lie to me. And ultimately what I see happening, because your statistics actually bear that out, and that is when you have a breakdown of the family, as we've seen, and almost a misplacement of the importance of a dad in the family, we see the results of that. So I think an educational campaign should be started immediately, talking about the importance of family, the importance of a mom and a dad in the home. And we're seeing it played out in our own prisons today, but yet we don't seem to want to talk about it. And I think it's important that we do, and it won't be fixed overnight, as we've seen. Thank you.
I believe absolutely that family does play an important role. But again, I want to touch on what I had talked about before with mental health services and fully funding those. If you have that at the school level, we can catch some of those problems before they become larger problems. And also at the prison system, you know, while we're talking about incarceration and those type of things, if you put mental health services at the prison level, that will help with our return rate. Our return rate is huge, and it is all based on how we do it. You know, we put somebody in there, we don't go back, we don't treat them, we don't figure out what the problem is. We have them serve their time, and then we send them back out. That's a big problem. So, and also, like I said, catching it at an early age. Family certainly is important, but there's a lot of other things that we can do to try to help with that, because we certainly can't make families stay together. There's no way to regulate that. It's certainly a hope of ours, but we need to do more.
Well, I definitely think that what happens is that we look at a lot of these areas where these folks are coming out of, where we have the most problems. And number one, it starts with jobs and the economy in a lot of areas where people do not have the opportunity and they fall into a bad area. They fall into crime. And the second point I would like to make too is a mental health issue. We've got a lot of people out there that are having problems that need help, they don't get help, and they end up in a system. So instead of us spending resources, a small amount of resources on them, we incarcerate people and spend vast amount of resources on them. And the third point I'd like to say real quickly is the fact that if we're gonna get serious about this problem, we have to fund to make sure that we have a reentry program where people that come out have a future, that we just don't keep having them come back and forth. And I think that's so crucial to taking care of that issue, that we have to have a good program. When they come out, we have a job for them. Thank you.
Okay, we'll start the next question with Mr. Germain. Child poverty rates are on the rise in Michigan, and its unemployment rate is high. How do you propose to address Michigan's economic problems while not negatively impacting the immediate needs of its children?
Talking about poverty rates, it absolutely is high. We have 1 in 5 children in poverty in this district, District 38, 13 of the 15 UP counties. 20% of those children are living under the poverty level. It starts with education. We need to fully fund education. We need to make sure that we're being innovative with our education, that we're getting a well-trained workforce in order to start attracting business here. We need to make Michigan more attractive to business. We need to make sure we foster small businesses to make sure that they have the tools they need to succeed in today's economy. And that's all going to help in the long run. The more that we can lift people up, it's going to help. Obviously, if you're making more money or if you're able to get into a better job in the area, you're going to be above the poverty rate. We took $4.6 million out of the economy in this district by eliminating the earned income tax credit. I think that needs to be replaced. Those are a couple of the things that we can work on, and I'm going to get the stop sign again. So here you go.
Yep, we'll just have you go down the line.
Well, I truly believe that what needs to happen to make sure we have less children in poverty is to make sure that they're supporting families and their parents have an opportunity for good jobs to be able to lift them up. I believe that's where it starts. I believe that making sure that the education system is funded so we have a future for them to go through a K through 12 system. And then we have to identify people that have problems where we can get them to human services to get them that there's no children going to bed hungry. There shouldn't be any of these kids in our state or our nation that are going to be hungry. We got to identify those people, and anybody that has people out there that are in need, we want to make sure that they contact the elected officials to make sure that they get direct service, to make sure that they're taken care of. And I think that that's the biggest thing, is there's a lot of people that are unidentified out there that are struggling, and there are programs to help them, get them educated, find them employment opportunities, and move these kids up. Thank you.
Could you repeat it?
Sure. Child poverty rates are on the rise in Michigan, and its unemployment rate is high. How do you propose to address Michigan's economic problems while not negatively impacting the immediate needs of its children?
Sure. I think everything you've heard is absolutely accurate. We need to have an educational system in place that can help these people get a decent education so they can move on to a decent job. The job climate is what's important for our region, and we certainly should be working on all the above there. I would just mention, though, that in fact, I believe Scott mentioned it earlier when he talked about the Upper Peninsula, but there's other places in Michigan too. I don't want to make it sound like we're the only ones, but we do have a good educational system. They've struggled with finances, absolutely, I think we'll all agree to that, but we have had a great educational system that our kids have gotten a good opportunity. I'm hearing one of the number one problems superintendents are telling me is that kids are not coming to school, and parents aren't being forced to make them come to school. So if we have that type of an element inside of our school systems that are happening, when you're talking about poverty and parents not being parents, it's a tough situation to try to handle, and you certainly can't blame the schools for that. And at the same time, society, we've got to come up with a way to make sure that these kids are getting into school and getting a good education.
Okay, the next question will start with Mr. Dianda. Studies show that the earliest years of life are critical, affecting brain development and setting the stage for all future physical, intellectual, and emotional development. What steps would you take to ensure that all children enter kindergarten ready to succeed?
Well, I truly believe also that we can get people ready to go to kindergarten ahead of the time that they go in. And that we have to make sure that there's programs out there for young families to be able to have their children at home with book programs, to be able to make sure they got access to libraries, that they got access to programs that understand about the music and how it all develops younger people and it gets their thought process wanting to start. And I think that that's part of being a state issue that with young children, that we make sure there's funding there for that. And before they even go into kindergarten, these younger people, these young families have to know that they're a big part of making sure they're the first great step in a leap that they're going to take. And a lot of that comes down to educating people and making sure that it's available to them.
I certainly believe that we have to start getting people in earlier. As Scott had mentioned, the development starts early. If we can start getting people into school programs early. The community programs are great, but we're going to have at this time anyway, with the way the funding levels are in Michigan, a partnership with private sector. How can we get these programs funded where they're free and available to people in our community? Where we can have a possible book reading program or some type of educational classes over the summer. And private industry and individuals have done great jobs. Here in your own backyard, there's a program called 31 Backpacks that feeds the children. Provides them meals on the weekends, provides them snacks during class, and that was all done by a couple of real estate agents up here. So there is room where individuals and private industry can help with some of these. But again, it's to get people engaged in that process, and that's a big question of how are we going to do that. We need to do it, absolutely, and that would help with that early childhood development, but also getting people in earlier or allowing them to go in earlier.
Studies show that the earliest years of life are critical, affecting brain development and setting the stage for all future physical, intellectual, and emotional development. What steps would you take to ensure that all children enter kindergarten ready to succeed?
Well, I think it's kind of a twofold deal. I think our past helps educate us. Actually, our past has a lot of information, if we look back, that kind of guides and directs us where we maybe should be looking. A couple things. Safety nets are important, and I've always tried to support safety nets for those families that can't do everything and can't do what they need to do to support the young people in the beginning stages of their life. In other words, what I found is families have been very successful when one of the parents has been able to stay home with the children. That's the best opportunity, I believe, for any child. The next step would be the safety net. When they can't do that for whatever reasons those might be, that we do have programs in place and that we do support those programs. And that's one of the things I've tried to do in that endeavor. But I also would say it is educational again, and that is we should be talking about all the above. We shouldn't just talk about a program somehow that's the best scenario for our children. Parents certainly are good for children, and we know that.
The next question will start with you, Mr. Casperson. What are your thoughts on making college more affordable for students?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot with students. I talk to kids in the government classes in high school, and they want to know that. One of the questions I give back to them is I ask them, where do they want to go to school? And so I have to clarify, are they asking me that they want us to help them get a university education, Michigan State, Michigan, a major university, or are they asking for a higher education? And the reason I ask that is because Michigan has a lot of great community colleges. And when you look at the community colleges and the foundation they can lay for children and young people getting a start with their education, it's affordable and it's a good education. And so if the answer is that they want me to find a way to get them a university education, it's going to be a little more difficult because the cost is so high. But I think there's a balance there, and there should be a balance.
Mr. Germain?
I'm sorry, you repeat that question?
Sure. What are your thoughts on making college more affordable for students?
Okay. One of the big things that we've been talking about is this. Over the course of the last 5 days, we've had several forums. The state needs to fund higher education. Every time that we make cuts to higher education, that gets passed on directly to the student. The university or the community college is not going to absorb that cost. So that's the biggest thing. We need to make sure that we are making education a priority in this state. That's K through 12, and that's higher education. And it sometimes gets passed on to the parents too if they're helping out with it. Another step is adding that vocational training and that technical training at the high school level. That gives them work experience and training that's free. And if they can go on and maybe get a one-year certificate after that, they can go into a good skilled trade. Now, not everybody's going to go into skilled trade either, I get that. And they're going to go strictly the higher education route, which is going to require us to make sure that we shore up that funding and that we're offering that funding there.
I guess what I would like to say is that I think that we need to take a look at how we're funding higher ed. I think that we got to look at statewide the appropriations process to make it more affordable for our students. And one of the things that I would definitely like to see us do is look at the amount of money that we give to the big universities right now. And I think that, we all see that U of M, not to pick on anybody from U of M, but we give them about $250 million a year in state money. They have over $2 billion in a trust for running that school. I think that us as the legislators, as the elected people, got to start looking at where we're going to make a lot more money to be able to put into the smaller community colleges and our other universities. I think that that's part of the process that would definitely make things more affordable. I think that's an issue that not a lot of people want to talk about, but it's out there. And if we're going to really look at higher ed and funding that, we're going to have to take a look and start looking at what we're spending on a lot of the sports and put a priority to education.